And for more on the Air Canada strike, I'm joined live by Stephen Tufts, a labor expert and associate professor at York University. Stephen, thanks so much for your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.
So in this latest labor dispute, we're hearing that the union has defied a legal back-to-work order. Air Canada is calling this illegal. What penalties could the union and workers be facing in this case?
Well, I think we have to back up and talk, first of all, about whether or not this is an illegal move by the union. Because you got to remember, Section 107 is being challenged in courts by not just this union, but other unions as well. So it's going to take some time to really sort this out. But it's true, there have been times in the past where penalties have been assessed to unions for violating back-to-work orders, sometimes financial, and in some cases, although very rare, labor leaders have been charged and imprisoned for not encouraging workers to go back to work. And we'll see if we get to that point over the next few days.
And the labor leaders have really been saying that this violates their Charter of Rights, that they were only able to strike for a couple of hours and that their services aren't necessarily an emergency. What do you make of all of this?
Well, this is true. There are some services under the Canada Labour Code that are deemed essential, police, for example. But that doesn't include the vast majority of workers covered under the code. And just because something's inconvenient doesn't mean you make the workers providing that service essential so the service can continue. And I think that's what's going to be decided in a number of court cases over the next months and years. But we have to keep in mind that this is a really generational round of bargaining. Air Canada had labor peace for over a decade. This was a 10-year agreement with the flight attendants. And we're just at this juncture, coming out of the pandemic, coming out of a long agreement, where flight attendants are trying to make up for a lot of lost ground in terms of wages for entry-level flight attendants. And of course, as was in your last piece, compensation for unpaid labor, which is sometimes referred to as boarding pay or ground pay.
Yeah, a lot is on the line, like you mentioned, the last collective agreement from 10 years ago. How do you expect things to play out over the next few days, few weeks? Air Canada says they're hoping to start those flights back up tomorrow, but then you have the union saying they're not going back to work.
Yeah, Air Canada actually thought they were going to get their flights resumed this evening. They actually issued that statement. And then, of course, they issued a statement today saying, no, it's going to be Monday evening. And now they're saying it might be 2 or 3 days. The fact is that when you have workers who are defying a work order and the chaos that goes into the system, you've lost control of the situation. And flight attendants have indicated that a number of them, maybe a majority, simply won't come back to work. And if that's the case, then Air Canada has a real issue on its hands. And the best way to solve this, of course, is to get to the bargaining table, bargain and negotiate a free agreement that is what the union is asking for, is to negotiate freely, and not always depend on the federal government to bail you out every time the union doesn't act the way you think it should. And I think that's a lesson Air Canada is really learning this weekend.
Yeah, we also saw the federal government step in when it came to that pilot strike not too long ago. Do you think this situation with flight attendants could change the way the federal government steps in when it comes to these strikes?
Well, I think it's interesting, but the point is the federal government didn't step in with the pilots a year ago. The federal government was in an election cycle. It was a different prime minister than we have now. And they signaled to Air Canada that they would not legislate or use Section 107 to get pilots back to work if they struck. And lo and behold, the pilots got a really good deal with Air Canada, 42% over 4 years, without a strike. And I think that's the lesson to be here, is that when the employer thinks the government is just simply going to legislate workers back to work or make a directive for them to get back to work, they stop bargaining. And I think Air Canada is really starting to learn that strategy has its limits.
And we have been hearing so many opinions about this from travelers, from people watching the show. And it seems like a lot of polls say that public opinion is on the side of these flight attendants. Do you think that could sway this situation at all, what the public opinion thinks?
Well, I think that CUPE has done a remarkable job in this round of bargaining, not only mobilizing its members. Remember, the strike mandate support for this strike was 99.7%, 10,000 workers. That's really unprecedented. but they also did a job at educating the public at what people are striking for. And this is the case of unpaid labor or ground pay, is a restructuring and a massive gain and correction of what really I think was an injustice in the way that flight attendants have been paid historically. And that's going to really reform, I think, the industry in North America. Now, we'll have to, it is inconvenient if you're one of the people who are stranded, like the person interviewed just prior a few minutes ago. But yes, most of the people, even some of the people who have been inconvenienced, realize that this is an important issue. And I think they sympathize with the idea of flight attendants getting paid for all their time, not just the time in the air.
Yeah, a lot of people saying it's for the greater good. Stephen Tufts, labor expert and associate professor at York University. Thanks so much for your analysis and your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.